Okay, we are interviewing Ray Eugene Wilson, who served in the Marine Corps during the Korean War. We are at his home in Columbia City. Mr. Wilson?
Yes.
Did you volunteer for the
Yes.
service? You did?
Yes.
What made you volunteer?
Well, I don't know. I just moved to Miami, Florida. I think I got a job at the end of December '47, and I was going home one day and saw a Marine recruiter. I went in and enlisted.
Had the Korean War started by then?
No.
It hadn't. So you had no idea this was coming?
No.
That was coming? Were you from Miami?
No, I was from Mishawaka.
From
I was
Mishawaka.
born in Mishawaka, and my mother and I moved down to Miami, and I got a place to live down there by myself, and then I moved in with my mother, and we stayed there until 1950. Of course, I was in the reserves, and we was the weekend warriors.
Can you explain that to us, what that meant?
We had one Wednesday, and the following Sunday, when we had drills and stuff, and fighter squadron, Corsairs. And
Did you fly the planes, or
no.
What were your duties?
I became a plane captain, where we get in and warm the planes up for the pilots, and sometimes we had to taxi the plane to another spot, and which was quite a big thing then for the young guy. And we stayed there until 1950, and Korean War broke out.
Before this, you said you were in the reserves at this point?
Yes.
Now, you had joined in 1948?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes.
And you went through, you had a regular tour of duty in 48 then, right?
Yeah, we in 48 we had a 2 weeks training. We went to Cherrypoint, North Carolina. In 49 we went to Cherrypoint. In 1950, I think the war broke out in early June or something.
Do you remember where you were when you found out about that the war had broken out?
I was at work in a hardware store.
You were working a hardware store. Is that what you were doing then when the war actually broke out?
That's I always worked there at Raleigh Mile in Miami. It was right in the middle of town. Mm-hmm. And we decided to come back to Mishawaka, and we came home, and I went to Glenville, Illinois to try to get a transfer from my squadron down there. And before the transfer came through, I had to go back to Miami.
But why was that?
They called me.
They ordered you back to Miami.
They ordered me back to Miami. And we spent 10 days down there, and while I was there, we had a hurricane go through, and they took all the planes, flew those over to another place, and all except 5 or 6 of these big hurricane hunters. And next morning, all the tails on these hurricane hunters were over about 15 degrees. They wrecked all of them.
Really?
And I was there. I was sewing on my PFC stripes. And, first sergeant came by and said, "What are you doing?" I says, "Getting ready." He says, "Well," he says, "you forget that you made sergeant, you made corporal." So I went up to, I got my corporal, and they took all the personnel, including the pilots and everybody, out of that squadron. Left this squadron there on paper, and they took all those guys up to Cherrypoint, and they put about 10 guys in this squadron, 10, and then all these different squadrons. And I was fortunate or unfortunate, I don't know which, but they put me in Overhaul Square in the repair squadron, and it was like working in a factory, really, and except we had to march to work and march home.
Were you living on a base then?
It was, yeah, we was living on the
Were you
base.
married then, Mr. Wilson?
No.
Yeah, we weren't married yet then.
And I had gone down to see Martha one time, and we went. Well, it was at Cherrypoint. When I got discharged, I said, well, she wants to marry me. I won't go back in. So she did, and I left the service then.
Left the service then.
But I had been enlisted for 3 years, and of course Harry Truman was the president, and he extended everybody 1 year, so I had to spend another year in, and made it 4 years, and they wouldn't discharge you on a Sunday, so that was 4 years and a day I was in, and I got out, and that was a couple months before I got out. I made sergeant, and I was only a sergeant a short time, but it still counted.
Still counts. So you spent you never left the country then?
No.
Okay. Well, a lot of people do, but you performed a very important service.
Well, everybody can't go overseas.
That's right. That's right. What were the kind of the support that you had at home? You said you weren't married at that. You weren't married at that time, but from what you said, I think you might have been dating.
Yes.
Your wife. Was your mother around there?
Yes, she was there.
She was still down there.
She was there.
What kind of support you get at home? I mean, you weren't living at home. You were living on the base, but.
Oh, they supported me. My brother was in the Seabees, and he was 13 years older than me. My brother-in-law was in the Army.
This was during this time.
Yeah, during before me at that time. They were in World War II.
Mm-hmm.
They all supported me. They thought it was great.
But you were fortunate that then, but to have your family right in that area with you. Okay.
Yeah.
You said that you were the squadron you were assigned to was repair and
Overhaul and repair.
What kind of things did you do there?
Well, we received like the Corsair engines and the R4D aircraft, which is the same as a DC-3. They all have about the same engine in them. This is a R2800. You see the engine in. We tear the thing down, put it in all baskets, and they would go through the whole thing, and they would check everything out and repair it if it had to be repaired and so on. And then we went, started to assemble the thing. And one thing I remember about where the cylinder comes through, it's cut in half of the cylinder here, half the body here. And then there was a bolt up through that, and we had to take a fine thread and wrap it around the back of the bolt, and so there was a thread between each cylinder, so that if there was any scratch or anything in there, it wouldn't leak. So planes are held together by a piece of thread.
Yeah, sounds like it.
And then we had to, after we completed that, then you went out to the test cells, and you sat in the test cells and hooked the thing up every which way, and you got in the booth and you started the engines up and sat there and basically just flew the thing for what I was determined length of time they had to be flown, and checked out, and then they was taken down and was put in a big can. It was like a big cylinder, two halves, and you mount the thing in and put the top on the thing, and it was like a big milk bottle like thing, but flat on both ends. And the engines were sent back to wherever they came from then.
Was it a regular 8 to 5 job?
Basically, yeah. And during all that time, we spent 33 days on mess duty. You got about 3 hours sleep a day, and two shifts of guard duty. First time I was corporal. I was corporal of the guard. Second time, everybody had rank then, and he was a sergeant, and I had to walk post.
What does that mean, walk post?
You had to stand the post and space. Yeah, well, you had so many sentries at each place, and you had to stay there.
You didn't. You just stood there and stood guard.
Yeah, you stood guard.
Okay.
Took care of that one area.
You mentioned something about having to have 30 some hours of mess. What kind
33
of thing?
days.
33 days. I'm sorry. Can you tell us what that meant, and then what was the food like there? How were you guys fed?
Very well. Our barracks was right across the street from the mess hall too, and they had a special barracks for when the guys that was on duty at mess hall. He got up about, I think it was about 4 o'clock, and you went over and you started working in the mess hall, you had different duties that you performed, cleaning the tables, and cleaning the garbage cans and everything. Sometimes you worked in the chow line, serving the food, and everything you could think of that you did.
Well, you know, when we watch the movies, when somebody says you have mess duty or KP duty, it's seen as a punishment. That doesn't. It seems like everybody did it. From what you're telling me.
Everybody did it, it seems like. And the reason we had 33 days though is because we had a couple holidays on the thing, and we had to stay a little longer. Otherwise, it was 30 days on the thing.
Well, speaking of holiday, how did they determine? I'm sure not everybody was able to go home for the holidays. How did they determine whether you were able to go home or not?
They let about half of us go.
About half?
Yeah. I think the first time I got out, I went home. That was the first Christmas. I went home. Well, I got off at that time, and 10 days off, and I went home. And the second time, I was couldn't go home because I was getting out in January, and so I had guard duty then. And it was I liked the service.
Did you? What was your basic training like? Everybody says it's really rough.
Basic training, I have no idea what it is.
You didn't do basic training?
I didn't do it.
Really?
We went up to Cherrypoint. There was one fellow I remember. He went over to Mag 2, and he had made staff sergeant in the reserves down in Miami. And they had sent him to Paris Island for boot camp. Our squadron, he said if you was a PFC or a private, you could go to boot camp. But if you was a corporal or above, you didn't go.
You didn't have to go.
So that was our squadron. And we just was lucky.
It's interesting. What kind of things you guys do for entertainment down there?
Well, we had one big long building that was had a bowling alley in it, had a tavern, or what you call it, slop shoot, and then we had another one at the other end was Christian Fellowship, and I been to all three when I was in Christian Fellowship, and we worked with the chaplain, and we helped on Easter. We helped give the Easter service, and I know the week before we'd got a flight down to Miami. A couple of us guys that was from Miami, still up there, went down there and went around, got a truck and went around the base, picked up palm fronds and got a bunch of those for the chapel, and we went down, I think, Saturday morning. No, we went down Friday night, and we stayed Saturday, and then Sunday we came back. We flew back, and did that a couple of times. Got hops to Miami and back, we'd go down, leave about 5 or so in the morning, and we'd stop at Jacksonville, Florida. And one time we was taxiing out to take off, and there was this plane that was taking off, and he took off and just started climbing, and then went into the, it was at the what's the St. James River, I think it is, in Jacksonville, and plane landed in the water, and I saw the pilot get out, and he was sitting on top of the plane.
Everyone was okay.
Yeah, and then we took off. But
how about movies and shows and things like that? Did you get to go to many of those?
yeah, we got to see Stan Kenton was down there. Well, there were several different big bands, and they had Marine Corps ball, and you had to wear dress blues to go to that.
Is that something normal or something
Yeah,
special?
it was
Annual.
normal for the base. And well, there was one time in '49, 20th Century Fox was making a movie, Slattery's Hurricane, and they had all the Marine personnel at the base and Navy personnel come out, and they had Marines detachment lining up out there. And we had to stand out there practically all day while these guys was filming the award ceremony for the Richard Widmark. And the movie had Richard Widmark, Linda Darnell, and Veronica Lake in it. And then at the end of the movie, they had us march across the thing, and they cut most of that out. Naturally.
Mr. Big Debate debut,
Yeah.
did you?
But it was interesting talking to some of the movie crew there, and so that was interesting. There was a lot of things. There was a time that I was always interested in Boy Scouts, and while we were at Cherrypoint, this guy, Doug Keller, and I decided they didn't have a Sea Scout ship down there. So we...
Oh, I'm sorry, can you tell me what Sea Scout?
Sea Scouts is something that's not normal around Fort Wayne here.
I don't know what it is.
Well, there's Cub Scouts, Boy Scouts, and Explorer Scouts, and Sea Scouts are the older groups. The Sea Scouts dress in a naval uniform, where the Boy Scouts dress in the other kind. And they are starting a Sea Scout ship in up on Lake James, I think, right now.
Here in Indiana?
Yeah.
Oh.
They got that
So they're
started.
still active? It's not.
Yeah, it's not.
Yeah.
It's still going. And highest rank in Sea Scouts is quartermaster. And but anyway, Doug and I started organized a ship down there, Ship 9, and we got about 20 boys interested in it, and it was most of them were Marine kids from Marines, and some Navy. And it happened to be that the Navy captain on the base, his son was interested in it. And we had a cruise that weekend. We went out Friday night and stayed at the cabin at the base, and then the next morning we took off and went down to I forget the name of the place now. Anyway, we got this this boat. It was about 26-foot long boat. And it had a little cabin on the thing, and a little engine in the thing, and you had a flywheel, and you had to spin the thing to get the thing to go putt, 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 putt along. And I had to teach the boys how to navigate the inland waterway down there to go out, and we stayed out on the Outer Banks overnight and came back Sunday then. And the captain he was going to be our cook. Then we had a small boat that we drug along behind the big boat, and we had the food in it. So he got in that and let the thing out, and then 4 o'clock he would make him sandwiches back there, and then we'd pull it back in, and so on. Anyway, that was one of the things that went on.
You were discharged then in 1952, you said. Okay, and but you knew that discharge was coming, right? It wasn't like it was like for the duration of the war. Or,
no,
you had signed up, and then President Truman extended your tour by 1 year. Where were you discharged at?
At Cherrypoint.
At Cherrypoint? And what did you do once you were discharged?
I came back to Mishawaka and went out to Omaha to see Martha, and came back.
How did you meet your wife?
Well, apartment place where we lived at had several apartments. She moved into when she got out of school. She moved in with her folks down there
In Florida.
in Miami.
Right.
And we happened to live in the same building.
Okay. Were you in the service then?
Yeah.
You were in the service when you actually met her. Okay. And then you came back to Mishawaka after you were discharged. Did you have a job at that point?
Didn't have a job then, but anyway, I happened to be an opening, and I got back in the hardware
That's in South
store
Bend.
in Mishawaka.
In Mishawaka. Okay.
And I worked there until we got married, and until 59, and then we moved down here.
What brought you to Columbia State?
The factory I was working for, I quit Addison's and went to Precision Plastics with Harry Bennett.
Mm-hmm.
And he came down here, and they found a place down here that they wanted to build and start business down here, and so we came down here with them.
Were you able to use any of the skills that you learned in the military and in your later life in any of your jobs, or
Not really.
not really? What did you do at Precision Plastic?
I was a foreman.
The foreman there.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. How about things like the Legion or any other of the social clubs, or however we want to define them?
Well, I got out of the service. I went the American Legion in Mishawaka. Sponsored first my Explorer unit, and then I went to Dodge Manufacturing, and I had a Sea Scout ship over there. And then when we left that, we moved down here. The Ken Trace was going to retire from Boy Scouts over here, and I took over his troop. And I got started down here fairly quick then, too.
See from your shirt you're a member of the Leatherneck Coffee Club. You want to tell us a little bit about them?
Yeah, I was one of the original ones started with them.
What do they do?
We meet the first Saturday of each month at 7:30. We started that down at what's that restaurant? Country Corners, and it got to be too small. After about 6 months, and we went to the Eagles.
How many members do you have?
Around 35 or so. It was 40. And we have 4 squads in there now.
And what kind of things do you do?
Well, we've had a golf outing. We've collected supplies for sent to the service for the Marines, and for the men and women both. And it's a real good fellowship down there. We opened the thing with Pledge of Allegiance and everything. And, I got a little statue that plays the Marine Corps hymn. And sometimes I take that.
Sometimes I like to ask the Marines and the Navy. There's always been some kind of rivalry in that. Although I believe the Marines are part of the Navy, aren't they?
Yes.
Yeah. Did you either experience or participate in any of that? The rivalry between the sailors and the Marines?
Not really, no.
No?
Because my brother was in the Seabees, and he said he wore Marine uniforms as much as he wore Navy uniforms.
Really?
And as a Seabee.
As a Seabee. When he was actually working, doing construction and
that's it.
things like that. It's fascinating. Well, Mr. Wilson, I don't have any more questions. Is there anything else that we haven't covered that you'd like everybody to know about?
No, I think that's about it. We're happy to help you.
Well, we appreciate your participation. It's extremely important what we're doing. We just have to get these stories for people like me, and we appreciate what you're doing.